evening, everybody. My name is Olga Sosa, and I'm out here with my other co-workers that we are here because the organizers of this event believe in language justice. And what this means is that we want everybody to participate in the language of their heart or understand in their language of their heart. And to make that possible, we will be using interpretation, simultaneous interpretation. And the way it works is you will see a global icon at the bottom. So as soon as I finish saying this in Spanish, you will see it at the bottom of your screen. If you are in a laptop or on a phone, you're going to see 3 dots where it says more, and you can also add interpretation there. So we do ask the participants to speak in a conversational space, because saying it sometimes in other languages, it takes longer time to say it what is being spoken in English. Okay, so hola, buenas tardes a todas las personas que nos acompañan el día de hoy. Mi nombre es Olga Sosa y estoy aquí con la comunidad de lenguaje cooperativa. Y antes que nada, quiero darle las gracias a los organizadores de este evento por hacer una entrega a la justicia del lenguaje. Y lo que eso significa es que queremos que todos participen en el lenguaje de su corazón, en el lenguaje en el que más se sienten cómodos. Y para hacer eso posible, estaremos usando la interpretación simultánea. Cuando termine de decir esto, usted va a ver un globo de icono en la parte de abajo. Le pedimos que escoja su lenguaje de preferencia. Okay, I think we're ready to add interpretation.
Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate you all being here. I just wanted to kick us off with a quick introduction, and I'll be listening like all of you. My name is Chantal Lewis, and I am the newly elected City Councilor, Director RTD, gotta shake that dust off, City Councilor for District 8. And I'm very, very excited to see each one of you, and more excited to have these conversations. I said time and time again that it was really important to me that we co-created anything that really came out of our council office. And so I'm excited about the opportunity to co-create budget priorities. Budgets are moral documents, and we've said that time and time again. And so I want to make sure that we are checking our morality, but we're also making sure that we're taking care of each one of you by making sure that those priorities are represented in our budget. We will have a bunch of budget hearings next week, and so we wanted to do these in advance, these meetings in advance of those budget hearings. So one, we knew where to pry, where to ask questions, as folks were giving us these presentations. Shannon is going to be our facilitator, Shannon Hoffman. She has done a number of these. She's worked with Soul to Soul Sisters. She has done work with the Schnipp Fund. And so she's really an expert and quite frankly loves to dig into budgets. And so I couldn't think of a better person to facilitate these meetings and these discussions. And with that, I will pass it over to Shannon, and I will be participating as well and really listening in.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Chantel, and thank you all for being here. Just so I can make sure we have, I'm seeing some requests about assigning folks as interpreters, so I might just ask Tiff to maybe PM folks or message folks if perhaps we may not need all interpreters this evening.
Okay, as far as Spanish, interpretation has not been added, so we're still waiting for interpretation to be added.
That's correct. I'm working on it right now. I'm having some technical difficulties. You said that we had folks who had signed up for it, Shannon?
No, I was just noting in the chat there's like a question from the interpreter as well.
Okay.
Okay, well, we can we can ask maybe, ¿hay alguien aquí que necesita español o podemos continuar? Okay. Well, then what would be helpful to me is just if we could have the folks that are residents in the space, since it's a small group of us, if folks might be comfortable to introduce who you are and what brought you here, maybe any curiosities you have. As Councilwoman Lewis said, we've had 2 of these already, and so both of them have been different kinds of conversations, which has been really neat. And the one yesterday on East Colfax was a smaller group, so we were able to have more small group dialogue, and we might be able to have something like that tonight. So I'm Shannon Hoffman, really excited to be here, do a series of community events about budgets and redistricting and all kinds of things to get folks involved in city government. And that is why I am here. So yeah, could we have folks that are residents go around and introduce themselves? Would anyone like to start? Yeah, Michael. Oh, you're on mute, Michael. Michael, if you're talking, you're on mute.
Hi, this is Mike Hughes. I'm in the blue shirt up there, and I'm a resident in an apartment complex in Central Park called Everly Central Park, and I'm also a member of a committee here. We run a program called What's Up, which every month we have speakers come in, and Chantel is scheduled to come in sometime in October, as I recall, and the other members of the committee asked me to sit in on this. They couldn't do it, and maybe just take some notes and then share with them those notes in preparation for Chantel's presentation in October, so that we have some preliminary information about Chantel and about the budget and maybe about some other issues that she's going to talk about. I don't know whether she has a fixed agenda for that presentation in October, but whatever it is, this will be valuable to us as preparatory for that.
Great. Thanks for being here.
Mm-hmm.
Median, would you like to hop in? I see you unmuted.
Yeah, I figured since I'm the other person on the camera, it just makes sense to do that. So yeah, my name is Median Holmes. I am born and raised from Denver, and I love saying that part out loud. So the communities that shaped me were the Five Points, Park Hill, Montbello, and Green Valley Ranch. I love all the things that Chantel is bringing into the community and into her leadership. So the reason that I came tonight really is to have an intentional conversation about some things that have come up recently, just from folks that I've engaged with, and just some questions that I have pertaining to the House 1000 plan. And so I guess just a little bit about me. I am the CEO for the Epitome of Black Excellence and Partnership. It's a nonprofit in the city that focuses on restoring, elevating, acknowledging, and protéging Black excellence in our city. And then I also am the owner and founder of 8 p.m. Consulting for Humanity, of which we do work in social justice, racial reconciliation, equity, inclusivity, and conflict. So we do a lot of curriculum building, development, and we bring that into spaces that extend from large organizations, political spaces, and then my favorite part is when we go into small book clubs and just work with people that are looking to have a conversation that they just have never had before. So that's kind of what I do, and that's life-giving work for me.
Thank you for being here. Frank, would you like to jump in? Frank, I can't quite hear you if you're speaking. Frank, if you want to put anything in the chat, I'm happy to read it out. So just let us know. And then it looks like our other person is Heather. Heather, would you like to introduce yourself?
Heather is muted according to my screen, so.
That's what I see as well. Okay, well, Heather, if you want to drop anything in the chat, same thing, we can read it there. Well, great. Well, thank you all for being here. As Chantel said, you know, a big part of this is thinking about how a budget is a moral document. And the other piece about this is the idea that together we know everything. I don't, I'm not, you know, an accountant or someone who purports to necessarily be an expert on budgets, but I am an expert facilitator and believe that when we bring community together, we know everything together that we need to know about where we want our budget priorities to be. Because this is your money. So what we're about to look at is, you know, the $1.6 billion city budget. So we're going to be looking at some pages from the 2023 budget. The 2024 budget literally just came out today, so I didn't have time to update our materials, but soon we'll be talking in community about that budget that Mayor Johnston just released. Great. Thank you for being here, Heather, and totally understand about prepping dinner, and glad you're here to learn more. So I am going to share my screen, but I'm also going to drop in the chat a link to this. So this is basically it's a Jamboard. It's a virtual whiteboard, if you will. And these are some pages from the 2023 city budget. So this right here to the left is the 2023 budget, $1.6 billion. You can see it in the pie chart, how it's divided out. And then these are all the agencies and their budgets by the millions. And then this is where we get our money from grants, and you can see where some of that goes. And then here is our revenue chart. So what I would love, if folks are willing, is for us to just take a few minutes. You can go over here to the left and get out a sticky note, and then you can write your observations and then stick them around. If that is not possible for you, just feel free to drop any observations in the chat. I'm also on your screen. You should be able to zoom in and out, but I can also zoom in and out if folks are having trouble navigating the Jamboard. So we'll just take a few minutes here.
This mic used. I guess I'll just make if you can hear me,
Yep, I can hear you, Mike.
an oral comment rather than the chat.
Sure.
I'm surprised to see that the largest revenue source is, and maybe I'm missing something, sales and use tax for the whole city.
That is what I'm seeing as well. Yes.
Huh.
What did you expect it to be?
Oh, I don't know. I'm relatively new to Colorado, and of course this is a city budget, not a school budget, but I'm from Pennsylvania, and I don't think if you looked at the city of Pittsburgh, which is where I'm from, that maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that would be the largest source there as well. Is that typical, as far as you know, for cities?
I don't know. I'm in a class right now with Colorado Fiscal Institute about Colorado state taxes, and I know that they did mention that, you know, across Colorado, most of the municipalities in Colorado are taxed around sales tax and that we have a higher sales tax than other states. So it may have something to do with Tabor because we're limited in other ways on taxing other things. But I'm learning a little bit more about that. And if you're interested in learning, the class is like pretty good, and it's a community program, so anyone can participate in it.
Well, I now that I think about it, Pittsburgh and many cities and even smaller municipalities in Western Pennsylvania anyway have a wage tax. Might be as much as 1% or 2% of wages that are paid to the municipality, including the cities. But there is no wage tax in Denver.
Yeah. Median, I see your hand up.
Yeah, so I think the question that I have is, so you said at the middle here, so this is the grants. Is this where we get revenue from? Is that what you said?
The one on the right, so that one that we're talking about over here with the sales and use tax, that's where we get the revenue. And then when I did this last year, some feedback I got from someone about having people look at budgets was that we should also look at grants as a place where we get a lot of our funding as well.
Okay, so so in the grant expenditures by year, that is indicative of what is being given out by the city. Is that what you're saying?
So this is funding that we get from grant sources. So it could be like state or federal grants. And then it's what department it's allocated to.
Okay.
What
and
then department it's allocated to.
Gotcha. And then on the left, the expenditure summary, is that how we're spending our dollars? Is that what that is? Okay. So I guess my question is in the grant space, like it's a very high, it's 140 million in the housing stability.
Yep.
And then when I look at the spending, it looks like housing stability is that line. Maybe I'm not tracking the line right, but is that the 35.73 line or is that the 140.16 line?
Is the 35.73 line. So I'm making an assumption, I'm not quite sure, but that this is not including the grants because it's just taking the revenue and putting it into what we spend here. Okay.
So is there a way to understand where the grant money, like, because if a grant, my interpretation of a grant is it's identified and pegged for that purpose, and then it's to be spent for that purpose. So if the grant amount is at 140 million, and then the expenditure that we're looking at right now is at 35.73, that's obviously a huge gap. So I'm just wondering, like, is there a way to see how is the rest of those monies being actually spent out for housing stability?
Yeah. And I'm not sure if Chantel wants to jump in here, but we've been talking about that at some of these other community meetings. And Chantel has been really a strong advocate right from the get-go that, a lot of where the spending comes out is in contracts. And so having more accountability and measurement in those contracts to also ensure that they're successful, right? And that we're not just like rubber stamping the same contracts over and over is another thing that she's digging into.
Okay, cool. And then I'm sorry, real quick, just one more thing. That's my sticky note there about how much of the housing stability is for reinvestment once the housing is erected. So like upkeep and making sure that we're not just building houses and then the abandonment happens and all of a sudden it's, no longer, a place that's being held with dignity. This is the best way to say it. So I'm just curious there as well.
I don't know how much of that goes back and forth, or sorry, not back and forth, but goes into that, but that's a question that we can certainly dig into.
Cool. Thank you.
But let me ask a question, just so maybe I understand. The 1.682 expenditure summary from the 2023 budget that's in thousands, so that's 1.6 billion. Is that right?
Can you point me to where you're looking at, Michael? I'm sorry.
Here on the left-hand side, the bottom line, 1.68221 in the first chart. first chart on the left.
So it's 1.6 billion.
Okay, so, all right, with that in mind, that's what I thought it was, because when I look over here and I talk about grant expenditures in the budget. If one of these numbers, for example, the housing stability, would be budgeted at 140 million. Is that correct? Is that, because that's part of the city budget, what it spends on grants to various organizations or various contracted organizations, public health, et cetera. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think this is getting at what Median was just asking about as well, that that we're seeing on the left that in the general fund there's about $34 million allocated to housing, and then within grants there's $140 million. And my interpretation of this is that they're separate, so you could almost think of it as like $175 million.
I don't see that housing number on the right. Oh, housing stability. Okay. Yeah, I see that.
And then Frank, I'm seeing what you're putting in the chat, so I'm just going to read it out. A much bigger issue than what the budget is who receives the money from the city from the budget. This is a rigged part of the game. 99% of all commercial institutional contractors are white men. That's rigged. What is being done about the leveling of equity and removing lawlessness in licensing scams? So again, I think that goes back to who receives these contracts, and it's also something that we can have as a part of the question or part of questions. So a big piece of what we're doing here tonight is compiling questions that you all have that Councilwoman Lewis can take to the budget hearings, which will happen next week. So in a moment, I'll walk us through what this entire process looks like. We might not be able to answer all of your questions this evening, but the purpose is to take those questions with Councilwoman Lewis into those hearings next week. And then contracts is not the problem. Licensing allows one to receive contracts. Licensing is very rigged. Can't have a contract if you've been discriminated against with licensing scams. And then Median, I see your hand up.
Yeah, so I'm just looking to get clarity because I'm a bit ignorant to the process. So if with the policing system, the jailing system, like does the city get money from our criminal legal system? And if so, where would that show up?
Like if we fine or ticket someone or something like that.
Yep.
I do see on this chart that there's fines and forfeits. But I don't know the exact answer to that question of where it shows up. I do know on the other end, when we are doing like police payouts for, violent behavior from police officers on citizens, that those payouts actually come out from a different area than this safety budget. So, I would think maybe it comes the other way, but that's a great question, and we can certainly inquire about that.
Okay, I'll put it on a sticky note for the sake of
Yes, please.
consistency.
Yes, please. Okay. Thank you for putting that sticky on there. And then any other general observations about this before we dive into what the overall process looks like? Okay. I think, Median, I can move this without messing you up doing your sticky. Is that right?
Yeah, yep.
Cool. Okay.
Okay. Was I blocking it?
No.
Oh, okay.
Okay, I'm going to skip through those budget priorities and we'll come back to them because I want to just walk us through where we are in this process right now. So, like I said, the Mayor Johnston today actually has released the 2024 proposed budget. I pulled it up so I could drop it in the chat for you all if you all want to take a look at it. It's there. Oops. So his proposed budget has been released. Next week, we will have budget hearings, so the 18th through the 25th. So every single one of those agencies that you saw on that left-hand chart, they will provide a budget presentation to all of the council members. And that's part of this, these community conversations, is so that Councilwoman Lewis can bring all of the community's questions to each of those agencies' hearings. If you all want to watch them, you can watch them on Channel 8. That's where they'll be live streamed. They go throughout the day. So they're usually very back to back. Then council will hold proposal budget workshops. So they will, after hearing all of those presentations from the agencies, council will be able to make recommendations to the mayor of what they want to see changed. Then the mayor has until October 16th to release his final proposed budget. And then October 23rd is a date that I really like to highlight for folks, because this is the date where City Council will be required to hold a public hearing on the budget. So every City Council meeting, there's 30 minutes of public comment at the beginning. And if you don't sign up early enough, then you don't make it within that 30 minutes, you don't get to speak. But at public hearings, every single person who signs up for comment, they get to speak. So if it's really important to you or other community members, that they want to speak on what they want to see in the budget, October 23rd will be the day that they are guaranteed that. Then October 30th and November 6th, council can propose amendments. And a big piece here is that council members need 9 votes in order to override any potential veto from the mayor to ensure that their amendment can make it into the budget. So, there may be some strategy sometimes around what amendments get proposed, or just that's something to keep in mind as we're watching this process and trying to figure out how to make any amendments. And then by November 13th, that is when the mayor will either accept or amend any of those amendments by council and release this final mayor's budget. Any questions or observations about this part? I'll just offer here that at some of the other meetings, especially the one last night, a big question folks had was, why does the mayor set the budget instead of the city council? Or why isn't there more outreach from agencies like Parks and Rec about what folks want in the Parks and Rec budget? And so I was sharing last night that is because it's set by the city charter. So in some ways, we are asking for concessions instead of being able to really set the agenda of how we'd like to see the budget. And that might be a conversation for another time, but just want to drop that tidbit here that that is how this process gets set, is through our charter. And if we ever want to change it, the charter is ours, and it's the people's document. So it requires a charter change, which requires a vote of the people, but it is possible. Okay, well, there is a small group of us. So I think what I'd like to do, what we did in the last sessions was had folks break up into small groups about these various budget priorities so that we could hear from you on what you would like to see within those budget priorities, specifically in District 8, that again can be carried with Councilwoman Lewis to these hearings. I'll be writing up a big report after these listening sessions for her. But what I'm thinking is, since we're a small group of folks, I'd like to just share through the budget priorities and then have y'all spend a little bit of time on any or all of them, again, making some sticky notes about whatever your thoughts are. Does that sound okay?
It sounds fine to me. But I have a question. Is the today's budget publication, is that available online yet?
Yes, I just dropped it in the chat.
Oh, I don't know how to do it. When I bring that up, it brings up a Jamboard. I don't know how to say. Can
I think
say
it's the
that?
other link. There's another link in there.
Are
The
you
first
able
one
to
was the
scroll?
Jamboard.
Yeah. Are you able to scroll down through the chat box?
Hold on. Okay, let me see. Let me scroll down and see
I
if
can message it to you directly.
Okay, well, if it's online, I can do it myself. I just want to be able to print it out and look at it.
It's 700 pages. So
I
maybe
won't print it out.
I'm warning you, print it at the library. You can print it for free.
Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna run through. So these are budget priorities that were set by council in May. So mostly the previous council, and then new council members were also able to add not priorities but other amendments more recently. But this is where council is saying that they would like to see the mayor put their budget priorities. So I'm just going to walk through these, and then we'll spend a little bit of time with what we would want to see for District 8 specifically, or any specifics we'd like to see. So the first one is on improving community engagement and customer service to support residents navigating city services, resources, accessibility, including language access. Oops. The next one is on increasing affordable housing and support those experiencing homelessness throughout our city, mitigate and reduce the involuntary displacement of community members. So, for this one, if folks have thoughts about the safe outdoor sites or the tiny home villages, or specific locations of those, that would be a great place to add any post-its or comments, or we could come back to those. Then we have a budget priority around strengthening community safety, decreasing youth violence, and fostering healthy families by investing in community-supported, data-driven, and anti-racist public health strategies, addressing root causes, and implementing interventions that ensure appropriate resources are allocated to the most suitable responders, following comprehensive de-escalation and race sensitivity training. Then we have support a robust infrastructure within our city and a strong network of partners throughout the community to sustain a thriving workforce, flourishing local business sector, and resilient local network of community organizations. The next one is protecting our natural environment through policy, public education, and investment in communities to combat climate change. And the last one is increase complete, safe, and predictable multimodal transportation connections throughout the city, including community outreach and education about these transportation options. So again, like this one, a comment might be something along the lines of increasing funding for e-bikes, or making that process more equitable for folks to access those. So again, we'd love for y'all to place any sticky note thoughts here, but we can also have more of a group conversation if there's a particular priority that you have some specific thoughts around. What is the source of revenue for STAR? When I have watched this previously, Heather, it has come out of the DDPHE, Denver Department of Public Health and Environment budget. So that might be a good budget hearing presentation to look at if you're curious about that. And then you could also go into the 2024 budget. Like I said, it's is a very large document, but that's when we can start using the Control F and starting to look for that. But the thing about the budget hearing, specifically to a question like, where's the source for STAR, is that often in these budget hearings is when they'll talk about, okay, we want to ask for $10 million more for STAR for 2 more vans and a staff member. And so that's a good place to watch those presentations and see who is supporting that, or if there are folks that you need to maybe to write your elected officials and ask for their support around that. So would y'all like a little bit of time to write some notes on here, or would you like to chat through a budget priority that you have a lot of thoughts on?
I know I led in with having thoughts on the houseless piece, but I am trying to read through it just to see if there's some spaces of answering the question, and I don't think there are. So, and I can put it on a sticky note, but I think the first question that I have that's very just blatant is the $48 million that's supposed to go to the 1,000 that are being housed. Just reconciling that, like $48 million for 1,000 people. And then the other piece was more so aligned to what I read in the budget that you sent. It spoke to, let me go back to it here. It spoke to the closing of the encampments. So it says here that, where does it say permanently close? So essentially, it sounds like the house 1,000 is going to house 1,000 people, and those encampments that they're coming from are going to be permanently closed. So I think it's safe to say that there's more than 1,000 people in this space in our city. So when you permanently close an encampment and you only have supported 1,000 being sheltered, where does everyone else go if those encampments are now closed? That to me is something that hasn't really been spoken into or answered. So if that means now that we're going back to a place where folks are going to be arrested and things like that, then that's going to also be very expensive. So those were the 2 primary questions that I had as I pulled details from it.
Yeah, I'm gonna keep these over here for questions that Councilwoman Lewis could take with her, because I also am very curious about this one about where will people go once encampments are closed. There was a good Denver article that I can share with you about where that 48 million is going toward. I do think that we could begin to ask even some more deeper questions about how much of that is going to temporary shelter. Even, tiny homes can be considered temporary shelter, and how much of that is going to actually like permanent supportive housing for folks. And, there are questions that we can continue to ask.
Yeah, and I read the same article. So I think that's where the question kind of, it just gets a little foggy, because if this is a temporary solution, that's a heavy investment for a temporary solution. So is the reality of it that this is actually supposed to be more permanent versus temporary? And I know that some of the zoning questions kind of came up in that space as well, that it just feels like this is moving more towards permanent versus temporary. And even with the unhoused, them bringing their voices, they're saying that that is not a permanent solution. So yeah. And then the last question as it pertains to the housing piece, and there already might be an answer for this, but the micro communities, just the size of the units, it is not conducive for families. So it sounds like this is really a focus on housing 1,000 individual people, and I'm not sure if there's that same energy or effort towards families being housed. So that's another question.
I think it's a great question because when we look at data from expert places like Metro Denver Homeless Initiative, we know that families are the fastest growing group of unhoused folks. And so, you know, again, going back to budgets or moral documents, like then that to me seems like where our allocation of resources should be going towards if that is the fastest growing group.
Yep, absolutely. So I won't monopolize. I'm going to put another question in the sticky note. So I'll go on mute.
And then Frank, I captured your thought here about the empty buildings at Aurora Community College at Lowry that could be used. And Heather, I'm going to make sure that I capture your thought here too about STAR resource allocation, just so that's flagged so we can be watching for that. If Denver houses 1,000 homeless but makes 2,000 homeless by failing to regulate corporations, particularly to artificially push up real estate prices, what will be achieved? Great question, Frank. I will put it in the housing area. Michael, did you have any thoughts here either about housing or any other of these priorities? Okay, I can't hear you, Mike, if you are speaking. Well, I'm gonna give us a few, like a minute or two more to write any final questions or thoughts, and then actually we'll just set a blank slide here. If there are other things that we didn't capture here, but this is essentially all of the content that we had for you this evening. It's a smaller group, so we're kind of finishing a little bit early, but happy to hang out and still hear more questions or thoughts from y'all. But this is really helpful to us because it will help inform all of Councilwoman Lewis's questions for next week during those hearings. And hopefully you all will be able to tune into those as well on Channel 8 while they're going on, especially if there's, one in particular that you want to watch.
I have another question.
Yes.
So in the summary piece, I didn't see it, but are there any dollars that are going to be allocated towards like true community collaboration, where the city is investing in community partners that have expertise in areas of safety, of race, of houselessness, like community collaborators that can really be invested in. So for instance, I'll go back to the unhoused. Is there money in the budget to hire some of those that have the expertise in being unhoused to work in these spaces to really inform how we engage as a city on these particular topics? So not just limited to housing, but race and, all of those things. So I didn't see anything in there, but I know it's very robust. So just wondering if you all have seen it. And if that's going to be something that we can either ask about or prioritize.
Can I
Oh yeah, go ahead, Tiff.
jump in on this one because it's something that was brought up this week, and I know it's something that Councilwoman Lewis is setting as a major priority. is ensuring that there is a more robust process in deciding who gets those contracts to provide services to, for instance, the unhoused community, especially when it gets a little bit more detailed, like our unhoused community struggling with substance use, or our LGBTQ communities, are different areas like that where we know there are disparities and inequities. So what I've been seeing, and what I hope will continue as these budget hearings go on, is that some of those providers in the past that have not maybe done the work that they promised to do, they're now asking for and requiring accountability metrics and pushing for looking at more of those community-based partners. And I think hearing from people in public comment about wanting to see those community collaborators will hopefully, push that point a little bit further with their city council members and with the mayor. Because as it stands right now, they pretty much seem to partner with the same agencies every year, and there hasn't been a lot of deviation from that. And we're seeing a lot of the council members, especially the newer ones, asking these much more difficult questions for these agencies, who have kind of not given really clear answers on how they are being accountable, or how they're showing that they are providing services equitably and treating their residents with dignity and respect. So I definitely encourage folks to continue to reach out to city council in their district and the at-large city council members to continue to push them to ask those questions, because I think that that's realistically the only way that we're going to get those dollars to more of those community collaborators.
And I wonder if there's an opportunity to approach this in through an and lens versus an either or. I know that there are some,
Right.
Service providers that have not, met standard just on morality, but I'm sure that there are some that have been working diligently, but they can't do it all by themselves, right? So there's no scarcity in this. So I just wonder if there is more so, not saying we're going to take from here to put it here, but
Right.
instead saying, let's make a bigger investment to ensure that we're including additional resources, because there isn't scarcity in this. That's the reason why I think we're in crisis, is because that was the approach from the last administration. So, so I just wonder if there's opportunity for there to be that narrative of, we can do those service providers that have built relationships, allow that to be scaled out, and then open up more investment for community collaborators that also have relationships,
Right.
that just essentially are ignored from a resource perspective.
Yeah, I agree completely. Even if we wanted to completely eliminate some of those service providers, I don't think that we could, for that reason. There is such a high volume of folks that need help. And as you made clear, we don't have the resources that we need to really meaningfully address the issue. And so I think the and is really important, because we need more, not less. And by strengthening those relationships, even between the providers and more of those community-based folks, to work together, even to provide more comprehensive care, would be better than kind of what, like you said, we've seen happening, in the last decade or so.
Yeah. Creating the platform to where now people want to work together versus against each other. That's going to be a better opportunity to truly serve, right? So I think again, if there are service providers out there that are not doing this morally correct, they've got to go and they shouldn't come back. Those that are doing it, if there's opportunity for collaboration and partnership, and now I don't have to feel like I'm bidding against, it's more like I'm bidding with, I think that would be a really good tone to set.
I think the other aspect of that, if it's okay for me to chime in again, is also looking at how those providers are taking care of their workers.
Yes.
Because we know that what they're experiencing, the caseloads, if you're experiencing near homelessness yourself, working for the unhoused, nobody can do a good job under those circumstances when you're fighting for your own survival. And the things that they're being asked, I think, to do and manage while not being paid fair wages and reasonable caseloads. I think that that's something else that really needs to be looked at as far as when city council looks at approving contracts, is how they're treating their staff.
Thanks, Tiff. Okay. Any other closing thoughts or questions? And that Jamboard will stay open, so y'all can also put any other thoughts that you have later on there as well.
That's super helpful. Thank you.
Cool. Well, thank you all so much for being here and staying engaged in your community and this conversation. It's really important. It is where we put our money, is where our values are. Yes, a long problem with homeless service providers is the city making service providers to violate rights of homeless. Yes. Well, thank you all again so much for being here. We'll be compiling all of your feedback into a document for Councilwoman Lewis that she can take with her. And then we will also be keeping you updated as this city budget process moves along.
I've also just dropped our email in the chat. So if you have any follow-up questions, any suggestions, any ideas that you would like to see our office engage with moving forward as it relates to budget or anything else, make sure and reach out. As most of you know already, Councilwoman Lewis is all about listening and involving community and co-governance. And so it's something that she's very committed to, and we want to make sure that we are providing those opportunities as much as possible.
Thanks for hosting in this platform and making it accessible. It's running around crazy. It makes it hard. So I really appreciate it.
We get it. We get it. And we want people to be able to participate however they can or how works for them. So cool.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. We're going to go ahead and end the meeting now.
Thanks, everyone. Bye. Bye,
Bye.
Mike. Bye, Frank.